Hey everybody, Backpack Hack here, coming at you with another trail tip. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make Hamburger Rocks, sometimes called hamburger gravel. It's basically just a highly processed, literally dehydrated meat that can be stored for long periods of time without the need for refrigeration. This is how I store it in these small jars. I simply repurpose them. They're ice cream toppings. Instead of sending to the recycle bin, I just put my hamburger rocks in them. You probably have most of the stuff you need to do this process at home. The only thing you might not have is a quality reusable coffee filter. You don't have to have this, but it certainly helps. The idea here is to remove as much fat from your ground beef as possible. We're going to do that in two steps. We're going to brown our meat and get rid of as much fat as we can in a liquid form, and then we're going to strain it with hot water through this filter. Now you can buy these filters online or at Walmart for like $5, $6, $7. Just make sure you get a very, very fine mesh to it. You can use a colander, but the problem I have with a colander is the size of the holes are way too big, and when you cook your meat, these holes are big enough that a lot of the small pieces of brown meat will fall through this hole. And I could see you losing 15, 20, 25% of your meat through these holes and down the drain. You can use cheesecloth if you needed to, but I find that it's very, very difficult to work with because you're working with a loose product and you're trying to keep it into a loose piece of material, and it's just hard to work with. It can be used, but I find a simple coffee filter works the best. It also helps if you have a dehydrator, but you don't have to have one. I'll show you the difference between the two towards the end of the video. But let's go ahead and get started cooking up our meat and get it browned up. There's nothing special about how to brown the meat. You simply want to break it up into as small of pieces as possible as you brown it. You brown it just like you would for any recipe that calls for browned ground beef. Our goal at this point is to simply make sure that it is completely browned. You can see that it's still got a little bit of pink left in there. There's some right in there. So you want to make sure that you get it broken down into as small chunks as possible and that it is thoroughly, completely cooked. And this is going to give you the ability to store this long term without refrigeration. How long can you store it without refrigeration? Well, I've heard a lot of different claims. I've heard anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. I haven't tested it, so I really have no idea, and I don't think there really is a way that you could test it with any reliability because somebody else is going to have different circumstances. Their temperature is going to be different, their humidity level is going to be different, their storage area is going to be different. So I don't think it's possible to really say it will last X number of months or X number of years without refrigeration. I have, however, stored them for 3 or 4 weeks outside of the refrigerator without any ill effect. This makes it great for backpacking and camping, so you aren't tied to refrigeration or an ice chest or cooler to add this to your recipes when you're out backpacking or camping. So you can add it to things like chili and chili mac, spaghetti, lasagna, anything that would benefit from having browned beef added to the recipe. And you can see all that fat right there that we're getting rid of. What we want to do is get rid of all this fat back here. And we do it with heat. We melt the fat to a liquid form, and then that way we can deal with it. And we're going to do it 2 ways. First off, we're going to try to leave as much of this fat right here as we can in the pan, and what does make it into our filtration gets washed away with hot water. So now that we've got our hamburger all browned up, we'll shut off the heat, and then we'll simply transfer it into our coffee filter. Again, if you're using something else like a colander or cheesecloth or a strainer of some sort, that's all you have to do is transfer it in there. And it's not all going to fit, so we're going to have to do this in several steps. And now we're ready to drain this. Now we're going to let this drain for a while. You can see all that fat dripping out of there. That's what we want to get rid of, is that fat. So we're going to let this set for a while, and then we're going to head over to the sink. Once we get the hamburger drained as much as we can in the skillet, we're going to turn our faucet on to the hottest water we can get. Now I have a purpose for this plate turned upside down, and that will become evident hopefully in a second. And all we're going to do, we're going to lower the flow rate a little bit, is we're just going to rinse off this hamburger as much as possible. And the reason I have the plate on here is I doubt it's going to show up on the film or on the video, but in the water that's coming out down here, I can see little, what looks like bubbles. And that is the actual grease or fat or oils that are in this hamburger being drained away from the hamburger as it's being rinsed off. And that's the reason I have that plate in there, is so I can visually see it. And I don't know if it's going to show up in the video or not. We'll just have to find out once I get it into the computer and look. But you want to pay attention to what this is showing you. As time goes by, you'll see less and less of that as you rinse this out with the hot water and rinse all that fat away with the hot water. Once you're satisfied that you've got as much fat away from this hamburger as you can, it's time to move on to the dehydrator. Once we have rinsed all of our ground beef, it took about 3 batches in this coffee filter for 1 pound, just to give you an idea. It's time to put it in the dehydrator, and there's going to be a lot of moisture in here, and what we're doing now is going to be getting rid of this moisture from rinsing off all this ground beef. I'm going to use my Excalibur dehydrator. If you do not have a dehydrator, what you can do is you can clean out your skillet completely, like you're going to store it away. Make sure you get all that grease and fat out of there, and put the ground beef back in, put it on low, and simmer it and stir it as it simmers until the steam quits rising out of the pan. But since I have a dehydrator that has a timer on it, I'm simply going to spread out 1 pound of ground beef. That's what I started out with. This is 1 pound of the ground beef that has been browned and drained of fat. And you can see why I use a coffee filter, because all these little pieces would go through a colander, and cheesecloth is just, like I said, a hard process to use. So I just use a coffee filter like that. They're cheap and easy to get a hold of. I'm going to tip this and drain some of the water off so it speeds up the process a little bit. And once I'm done running the water off of it, I'm going to head off to the dehydrator. I'm going to pull out the next to the top tray and put this in the second slot from the top. And this will give me enough headroom to give me good airflow to make sure this gets dehydrated very, very quickly. So I'm going to put the cover on it. I use 165 degrees. Let's go ahead and turn it on and get all that water out of it. Now, in order to rehydrate your Hamburger Rocks, you simply take the desired amount, pour it into a container, and add just a little bit of water. It isn't going to take much. But what you want to do is let that soak for a while, and if it soaks up all that water, you simply add a little bit more until you get water sitting around in your container. If there's too much, you can always drain it off, but if it's not enough, you can always add more. So that's all you need to do to make it ready to go into your recipe. And there is the finished product ready for final packaging. Again, I want to point out why I use a coffee filter, because look at all this fine ground beef that is just really small pieces that would fall through a colander and would basically just clog up cheesecloth. And that's why I use the coffee filter, because it's easy to use and easy to clean. Now that I have it all dehydrated, I'm going to go ahead and put it into a jar for final storage. And I'm just going to use that funnel to drive it right into the glass. And there is a container of Hamburger Rocks ready to go into the refrigerator. Again, you can use this in chili, lasagna, potato soup, chili mac or chili, what have you. Again, I store it in the refrigerator just in these recycled jars. It stays for a long time for me, and you can keep it in your pack, in your gear, for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 or 4, without refrigeration and not have to worry about it going rancid. So this is Backpack Hack coming at you with this trail tip. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment on my videos. Be safe out there, and I'll see you out on the trail.